Get home from school, turn on my TV. Who are these friends staring right back at me? Now that we're old.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Jessica, and this is 90s Babies Nostalgia, where two 90s babies are having some fun.
Just to be clear, we're not sponsored by nor affiliated with anything that we talk about in this podcast. We just like talking about TV and movies. And today, the movie that we are talking about is The Half of It. Before we get into it, because we are celebrating Pride, baby, Jessica, what is one of your gay/bi awakenings?
For this one, I am gonna do 70 Jane. Do you know who that is?
No.
Okay, I'm pretty sure she's she's just a hairstylist and nature photographer now. But in the I don't know, around the time that we were graduating high school, so 2011, 2012, she was a really, really, really big model and was on the cover of Inked multiple times. And she's just this little baddie blonde, head to toe tattoos. And I was obsessed with her. Had her as my phone screen cover. Absolutely loved her.
Okay. So a tattoo artist.
No, she's a model.
Oh, a tattoo model.
Yeah. I would say just in general a model, but at that time she would be most famous or well known for being on the cover of Inked, which is specifically a tattoo magazine, but she was just a model.
What does she look like?
Like if Kesha was a little skinnier and had 7,000 tattoos.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, it checks out. What is one of yours?
For this one, I will go with a Danny Phantom. Yeah, Danny Phantom, he was just 14 when his parents built a very strange machine. Anyway, I'm not going to do that whole song, even though I can. It was Danny and it was Sam. It was the two of them. Both. That was, and I'm not saying that I was watching that show oh my god, I'm bisexual. I'm saying I was watching that show obsessed with them both and the idea of them maybe being together. And yes, it's a cartoon, but I'm sorry, they're both my type. And I didn't realize it at the time. But as an adult, this is my thing about gay awakenings that I've told you. Is I've never watched something the way that Kit Connor and Heartstopper watches Pirates and is oh my god, I'm bisexual. I've never had that moment with media, but I've had moments where I look back on media knowing I'm bisexual now and have been oh, I totally was crushing on that character.
Yeah. Yeah, I told you I struggle with the concept of them as well, just because I feel like I've always kind of known, and I was experimenting in my life, just at a young age. So it was I just don't think I've had these same awakenings the way other people did, but I can look back and be oh, I bought every cover that 70 Jane was on. I had her as my phone wallpaper. There was definitely people who I had obsessions with that were a little bit past just oh, I think that person is really talented.
Yeah. And I think with women in particular, there's very much the do I want to be her or be with her? And as kids, we think it's the be her. And then as a queer woman looking back on it, you're oh no, I wanted to be with her.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, Danny Phantom is looking back and saying, why did I care so much about their relationship when it was not a big deal in the cartoon? Maybe because I just cared about them as characters.
Yeah.
Getting into it, we have lots to discuss in our movie today.
Yeah, so we're talking about The Half of It, which was released on May 1st of 2020 on Netflix. It's a coming-of-age comedy drama. It was written, directed, and produced by Alice Wu. Besides for this movie, she's known for Saving Face, which came out in 2004. And she's also really, really known for centering Chinese American and lesbian characters in her works, and she herself is a lesbian. She started writing this in the aftermath of the 2016 presidential election, I thought it was funny to include this because the next movie that we cover for Pride Month in a couple weeks will be Red, White, and Royal Blue, which also was written in the aftermath of the 2016 presidential election.
Wow, I didn't know that about either of these.
Yeah.
This one feels so autobiographical that I just assumed it was something she was working on for most of her life.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where that election just like struck a chord in especially so many creatives and artists who are like,
Mhm.
I need to dive into my art as a form of escapism because like
Yeah.
I will not survive if I don't.
I do think also a lot of queer people and women and people of color were really striving to make a statement that even if you hate us, we're still here and we're still human.
Yeah. Yeah. It was inspired by Edmond Rostand's 1897 play. Oh, guys, I always tell myself I'm going to look up these words and how to pronounce them before the podcast, and then I do not. Cyrano de
I think it's
Bergerac.
Cyrano.
Cyrano.
De Bergerac.
Yeah. So it was very, very loosely inspired by that, but she does quote it as inspiration. Also, for the half of it, Alice chose to do a test screening in a small conservative town because she wanted to know how conservatives would feel about the movie before it launched on Netflix. She kind of wanted to know what she was getting herself into with it being like dropped on this huge streaming platform. And they enjoyed it. The test screenings went really well, and it made her feel like a lot more confident going into the premiere. Additionally, this was produced by Anthony Bergman, who produced the 2021 In the Heights and Do Revenge, as well as M. Blair Beard.
Do Revenge is another one I've always meant to watch.
Yeah, it's on my list. I haven't seen it, but I know I should watch it.
I feel like we should watch it for the podcast.
Yeah,
Guys,
we
if you want
should.
to hear us talk about Do Revenge, leave us a
Yeah,
comment.
let us know.
Our actors/characters, we are starring Miss Ellie Chu, who is 17 at the time. She's a senior in high school, and she is Chinese American. Her parents immigrated when she was young. She's quiet, she's shy, she's a straight A student, and she's very, very responsible. As we see early on, she has sort of taken over the household responsibilities for her father after her mother passed, who, her mother passed and then her father kind of like stopped trying as much.
And Ellie is played by Leah Lewis, who was 24 at the time of filming. She also is known for playing Georgia Fan in the Nancy Drew series, the more recent one, as well as Station 19, Fred 3, and the voice of Ember Lumen in Elemental.
Yeah, the Disney Pixar film.
Yep.
Also, I've seen her in the Charmed reboot in like 2018 or something. It was before this. And that was one of those moments that I've had where I've talked about this on the pod that I like see a face and I'll be like, why do I know that person?
Yeah.
Like she's a guest star in like one episode and I've not even watched the whole reboot, but I've seen that episode and she has the ugliest makeup on. It's terrible special effects. I really encourage everyone to look it up for a laugh. Opposite of Ellie Chu, we have Paul Munsky, who is also 17 years old, a senior in high school, and I can only describe him as the best example of a himbo that has ever graced my screen. He is the love of my life. I live and die for Paul Munsky. Also, he plays football.
Paul Munsky is played by Daniel Diemer, who also was 24 at the time. He is known for playing a recurring role as Cole in Sacred Lies, as well as Kent in The Man in the High Castle.
Next up, we have Miss Aster Flores, another senior in high school. Surprise, surprise. She is the pretty girl. She's popular. She's also not from Squamish. Her family moved from Sacramento. Her dad, I think, is Hispanic and he's the local pastor. And she kind of just keeps to herself. Like everyone likes her, but they don't really know her.
Aster was played by Alexxis Lemire, who's 24. Besides for this film, she's known for a role in a TV horror film, Truth or Dare, as Jessie Havnell, and a Lifetime thriller, The Art of Murder, where she played Kate Miller.
Edwin Chu is Ellie's father. He is an immigrant from China with a PhD in engineering who took a job as the station manager in the small town of Squamish, which we haven't mentioned is where this is set. It's a fictional town, but it's loosely based on various small towns in Washington. Like I said, he moved and took a job as a station manager, but he's not been able to move upward in life because he doesn't speak English super well, and he's kind of stopped trying after the passing of his wife.
Edwin is played by Colin Chow, who's 53. He's known for playing Seraph in The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolution, plus has starred in like so many martial arts films, including Fearless, Flashpoint, and The Forbidden Kingdom. But when I say so many, so many. To me, I thought this was a fun inclusion on the cast because this really felt like Alice Wu, who is Taiwanese, grew up watching Colin and was like, oh my god, we can get him to play Ellie's dad. He only does martial arts films, but let's get him. Like, because everything else he's in just does not align with this movie. But yeah, it just felt like a fun ad.
I feel like that is something that happens really beautifully in the Asian American cinema community, because there's been a lot lately of more Asian American stories like Everything Everywhere All at Once
Yeah.
and Shang-Chi, where a lot of the elder actors are mainland Asian actors who have mostly done martial arts or done Chinese dramas or things like that, but have been like ushered into American cinema, and it's been really beautiful to watch.
Yeah. Looking at his filmography, I was like, oh, this is a really fun inclusion. And I'm sure like the creator was stoked to be able to get him on the cast as well, you know?
Yeah, that's what I love so much about it, is that you know that for the average audience member, it doesn't really matter, but for the people involved in making the project,
Mhm.
that's like one of their heroes probably.
Yeah.
Next in our cast is Trig Carson, another senior in high school. He's Aster's boyfriend. He's an idiot jock who's full of himself. That's it.
Yeah, he is played by Wolfgang Novogratz, who's 23. He's very like Netflix films of this time type of guy. So he was also in Sierra Burgess is a Loser, The Last Summer, and Feel the Beat.
And then Mrs. Gesselshop. I don't know how, she's the English teacher, guys. She's the English teacher. And she's really the only person in the film who sees Ellie for who she is from the beginning. So she kind of plays this voice of reason.
And she is played by Becky Ann Baker, who is 67. She's known for the role of Jean Weir in Freaks and Geeks, Lorraine Horvath on Girls, which she won an Emmy for that role, and then other TV roles on All My Children, Younger, Big Little Lies, as well as film credits including Men in Black, War of the Worlds, Spider-Man 3. She's another one on this cast that, like, if we were to cover all her film credits, that would be the entire podcast.
So that's the majority of our cast. Obviously there's other actors, but this is who matters. So we open up with some, it's kind of a montage. This film is a fan of the montage. If you're
Mhm.
looking tonally for this film, it, like Jess mentioned, Netflix of this time, it came out after Sierra Burgess is a Loser, when To All the Boys was dominating Netflix. They put out a lot of like soft rom-coms. So we have a lovely soft shot of the forest and Ellie biking through, and her classmates are clearly all white. They're all from families who have been there for generations. They tease her when they pass her and she's biking to school and they're in their cars and they shout chugga chugga choo choo. But at the same time in this montage, we find out that they've been paying her to write their essays
Mhm.
because she is so smart. So Mr. Paul Munsky, himbo extraordinaire, comes up to her and asks her to help him write a love letter to Aster Flores because he thinks that it's romantic. And at first, Ellie says no, but then the power company informs her that they are 3 months overdue on payments, and without an immediate payment of $50, her power is going to be shut off. So she agrees to one letter, which obviously quickly becomes more letters. Because what would this film be if it were just one letter? So,
And so this begins like an exchange of letters between Paul, written by Ellie, and Aster, who's receptive to the letters because she just feels like really lonely and unheard in her life, and she's kind of just going with the flow. And because of this, Paul and Ellie begin hanging out more, and Paul pressures Ellie to secure a date with Aster. And so they start using a messaging app. So they kind of separate from the letters and start using a messaging app where Ellie can talk to Aster as Paul.
yeah, and it's like not WhatsApp. It's like an anonymous one.
Ghost Messenger, which
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think is they're playing on Snapchat.
Yeah, something like that.
Paul absolutely fumbles the first date. It goes terribly. It's extremely awkward. But Aster does agree to go on a second date with him, but they give 3 weeks. So this way, Paul has time to be tutored by Ellie on all things Aster. So she's tutoring him on classic films and books, and they also spy on her.
They do. They do. And also they have this like recurring thing where they're playing ping pong so that Ellie can teach him how to have a conversation. Through all of this, they become genuine friends. They have all these scenes where he's like running after Ellie while she's on the bike going to school and he's like getting faster, which is just kind of funny and unnecessary. He starts standing up for her when people shout chugga chugga choo choo at her. He yells at them. And we find out he drinks Yakult, which is a sugary yogurt drink that's very popular in Asia. It's delicious. And the coach stocks the vending machine for the football team for them. And Ellie makes a comment like she loves it, but the nearest Asian grocery store is 2 hours away by bike. They're like learning more about each other as they're studying Aster. And also Ellie is genuinely tutoring him. Like in the station booth, writing down things that Aster likes and making him study like it's for a test.
Yeah, and whenever he gets off topic, she tries to like steer him back to Aster.
She's also not very receptive to any questions about herself for a while. But we do learn that Ellie wants to go to a school called Grinnell, which I thought was made up for this film, but it turns out is totally real. It's a liberal arts college in Iowa, but instead she's going to go to a school in Washington because she has a full ride and she can't afford to leave. Paul, we learn, is from like a large chaotic family that has a sausage company, and he wants to change the recipe and improve on it, but he knows that his mom won't be receptive to it. And also he started creating the sausage taco or taco sausage, taco
Mhm.
sausage,
Taco sausage.
which is a taco shell with a sausage in it. And he thinks it's really good. And he writes to local food reviewers because he needs to prove himself to his family. It's very silly and very fun.
And so Paul ends up making the taco sausage for Ellie and her dad, and both of them really like it. And they all eat it and watch a movie together. And in this movie, there's like a romantic scene where a guy's chasing after a train with a woman in it. And both Paul and Ellie's dad are like, oh, this is so sweet. What a lovely gesture. And Ellie is like, it's embarrassing. He's making a huge scene for nothing. Then we get to the diner date number 2, where Paul and Aster are on the second day after all of the tutoring, and it is still off to another awkward start. No surprise there. Ellie is watching through the window and she sees this, and so she texts as Paul to Aster to try to keep the date on track. And Paul is stressed because he doesn't know what Ellie is saying, and he has Aster right in front of him. So he's like, what the hell are you telling her? And so eventually he interrupts the texting and he's like, I like you as more than a friend. And at this point, Ellie kind of stops listening in and watching on the date and rides her bike back home. And later, Paul shares that it went really well and they ended up going out and getting milkshakes and holding hands and that he kissed her.
There's a winter talent show that is mandatory for all the seniors to perform in. And Trig and his friends sabotaged Ellie because everyone's a fucking dickhead. So they like cut a couple chords in the piano, which she was going to perform a song on. and people try to boo her off stage, but Paul just like very innocently slides a guitar to her and tells her to play her song. And so she just quietly plays guitar and sings I think an original song we've seen her playing before, and everyone cheers. And Trig is like, when did Ellie Chu get kind of hot? And then she gets invited to a party where suddenly people want to talk to her. It's a little confusing, but it's fun. And she gets drunk, so Paul takes her home to his home.
And in the morning, Aster shows up to Paul's house because she has a painting that she made to give to him, and she got back from Sacramento early, but instead finds Ellie in his bed. And Ellie explains, like, we're just friends, Paul really likes you. And Aster's like, okay, cool. I already lied to my dad about where I was going, so can we hang out if Paul's not here? And so they do, and Ellie takes her to the train light signals, and then Aster's like, I want to share my special spot with you, and drives her like off to this like forest area where there's like
a hot spring.
Yeah, and they end up getting in the hot spring and listening to the radio, and they're just like lying and floating in the water and talking. It's very like, the atmosphere is just beautiful. The shots are really beautiful in this part of the film.
It's
And
so beautiful.
yeah, and Aster is kind of talking to Ellie and opening up, and is like, I don't really know what to do. Like, I want to go to art school, but I probably should just stay in Squamish and marry Trig, like, because that's what I'm supposed to do. And then they kind of end their little afternoon adventure.
When they get back, Aster sees Paul and kisses him, which is interesting. Then there is the town football match, and Paul, because he has been running after Ellie on her bike, is so fast that he scores the first touchdown in this football team's history in 15 years.
I fucking love Paul.
15 years, their first score, and he gets it. And then we see Ellie stocking up on Yakult with her arms full at the vending machine. And we've noticed there's been moments where Paul's like kind of looking at Ellie, appreciating her as a human more. And so he sees her there and he tries to kiss her, and she's like, bro, what the fuck are you doing? And Aster walks in at that moment and sees them, and Ellie's like trying to explain to her, like, no, it's not what it looks like. And because Ellie does that, Paul then realizes she cares more about what Aster thinks than him, and that she likes Aster and says it's a sin and she's going to hell. Not judgmentally, just like very plainly.
And this kind of causes Paul and Ellie to stop hanging out. He Googles about being gay, and his mom, he walks away from the laptop and shuts it, but when she opens it, she sees that he had Googled this. Paul ends up delivering sausage to Ellie's dad, and the two of them have a heart-to-heart about how Ellie is different and about Ellie's mom. It's very sweet. Paul and Ellie's dad have a very cute relationship.
Yeah. At church, Trig proposes to Aster. And this is where it all comes to a head, because he proposes and Ellie stands up and says no. And she tries to speak, but she fumbles a bit. So then Paul stands up and tries to help her. And then the two of them go back and forth, and like the pastor and Trig are trying to like interject, and they're like, no. And through what they say, Aster ends up realizing that Ellie's the one that's been writing the letters to her. And so she just like very boss-like slaps Paul in the face without even looking at him and walks out of the church. And then Paul's mom asks if he's gay, and Trig is like, am I the good painting, not the great one? And like all hell breaks loose in the church. It's very funny.
Later on, we see Ellie's dad is preparing food for her to go to Grinnell because it's a long train ride, so he's preparing enough dumplings to get her through
6 days.
Yeah. Later, Ellie finds Aster outside of a restaurant, and she apologizes for lying. And Aster's deep down, she's like, I kind of always knew this wasn't Paul. Like, he was very different in person. Also, you didn't use enough emojis. And she opens up that she is going to go to art school, and she's hoping to figure more out about like what she wants to do and who she wants to be there. And Ellie kisses her before leaving.
Before she kisses her, they do have a talk about sexuality without talking about sexuality, because Aster says, like, it's not like I haven't thought about it. Maybe I'll find out if I could be different. I don't know. And Ellie's like, oh, not me. I couldn't be different. I mean, what does God think? And it's like a little playful thing before she kisses her. And then Paul sees Ellie off on the train to Iowa. And in this really sweet, beautiful ending, he chases after the train and she cries.
Yeah.
And it's so sweet. And that's the
It's
end.
sweet.
That's the half of it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I just have to say, like, this is my ultimate comfort movie. No matter what Jess has to say next, because I know what some of it is. This is my ultimate comfort movie. Like, full stop. I hadn't seen it in over a year because I went through a phase where I was watching it about once a month.
Oh my God. I didn't realize it was that often.
I've seen it about a dozen times, which is a
Okay.
lot for me because I don't rewatch movies very often. This one and To All the Boys I've Loved Before are pretty much the only ones that I like instinctively rewatch. I'll just like put them on. I've also made at least 4 of my friends watch this movie. So that's 4 times I've watched it just with other people. I love it. It's just like comforting. It's beautifully shot. The music is like soothing and the stakes are never high. There's no sex or drugs, which some people might say is unrealistic. I don't personally care. It's just like, it's a warm hug for me.
I know I have seen this movie multiple times. Maybe this was my 3rd time, maybe 4th. But Amanda always brings it up as one of her comfort movies when we're texting. And I always read the description and I'm like, I think maybe I've seen that. It sounds vaguely familiar. And then a few months ago, before we even decided to do this on the podcast, I went to sit down and watch it and I fell asleep. And then I remembered, oh, I have tried to watch this movie multiple times before. I always fall asleep. For the podcast, I did not fall asleep. I watched the whole thing. It is really good. It's all the things that Amanda's saying. It's beautifully shot. It's a really lovely story told in an interesting way. It is great. I just think because of the way it's shot and the pace of it, it does feel a little slow for it not being that long of a movie. It's only like an hour and 50 minutes or something. And the way that it makes me so tired 45 minutes in, and I just want to curl up and fall asleep.
Do you think that's because it's too soothing?
I think it is, like, the way it's shot and the music is so, it's not like Challengers where it's like, and
Yeah,
like,
there's no suspense.
yeah, like you were kind of like woken up. Like the music doesn't wake you up. Everything is just like lovely and comforting and beautiful. And I think it makes me want to take a nap. But not in a way that it made me tired because I hated it. You know what I mean? I'm not sleeping because I disliked it and I would rather be sleeping. I'm sleeping because it's like cozy and it's just a little slow. Like the pace does feel slow.
I will say, watching it, I watched it last night. The pacing wasn't as slow as I remembered, which I was surprised by. But that might be because I've seen it so many times. Although I would think that I would feel slower because I know it's coming. I don't know. It felt like it went by quicker this time. There have been times I've watched it where it felt a little slower, like it dragged a little. I think in general, there is that suspense of you don't know what's going to happen because you know with the letter writing, something has to happen, right? That has to culminate in something.
Yeah.
And you can tell before the letter writing ever happens that Ellie has a crush on Aster, but you don't ever feel like the stakes are that high. And part of that is that this isn't a romance. And part of it is that they are all seniors in high school who are inevitably going to leave Squamish or not leave Squamish. And that's equally the conundrum of the story, you know? So,
Yeah.
but that's also what I like about it. Like this film is a huge part of the inspiration towards one of the books that I'm writing on that I always describe as like a coming of age written as a romance, where I want it to feel like the stakes are like so inconsequential. I just really like it. I'm glad you don't dislike it. You can tell me if you dislike it. It's okay.
I don't dislike it, but I would never go out of my way to watch it. But if someone wanted to put it on, I would be fine to watch it, you know?
Okay. Getting into things that we have to talk about.
Yeah.
Our favorite moments. Just jumping off the bat. Alexxis Lemire, who plays Aster Flores. is stunning.
Mm-hmm.
She's so beautiful. And Aster doesn't even have that much of a personality. And I'm fine with that because, yeah, that's it. That was my
She's
first
just
note.
like pretty girl that moved from the big city to the small town. Like that's very the vibe she's giving, but not
I
much
mean,
more.
she moved from
Big
Sacramento. That's
city.
not that big of a city.
Sure. But compared to Squamish, like I feel like that is the role that she is playing in that film. Because
Yeah.
everyone else is from there.
From the very beginning, we find out Ellie, not only does she write everyone's essays, but she gives different takes on it. Like it's clearly not like fake, although the teacher knows anyway. So the teacher's like, wow, 6 different takes on Play-Doh. I'm impressed. And I'm like, how does she even do that? I could barely
Yeah.
get the one essay done. How is she doing 6 different takes on Play-Doh?
And also, that was my thing, only for $20. I'm like, that is a lot of effort and a lot of brain power for only $20 an essay.
Well, it's a small town.
Sure, but still.
But she does have a rule. It's an A or you don't pay, which is a gamble.
She also doesn't write anything over 10 pages, which I was
Mm.
like, good that you have rules, girl.
Yeah, but I can't remember, right? I don't think I ever wrote anything over 10 pages for high school. I only wrote a handful of things over 10 pages for college.
Oh, I wrote many things over 10 pages for college, but yeah, high school, no. This movie, I like that its scene breaks and its transition scenes. It will have like quotes from famous authors, philosophers,
And then the
poets.
characters.
Yeah. And so it will have just like different quotes instead of having like B-roll or something to transition the scene. And I kind of liked that because it really played into the story too.
Yeah, you can tell that they're using that to signify that this is another part of the story and their growth. And it's really fun because you can see the inspiration that Alice Wu brought into this with like different philosophers or authors mentioned. Like there's Oscar Wilde and there's Plato and all of that. But then as it progresses, there's a quote that's Ellie and there's an emoji that is part of it. Because at the end, or because while they're talking, Paul has at one point said that Ellie should send emojis, the owl emoji, the caterpillar with glasses, and a pineapple. And so the last one of these is a pineapple, an owl, and a caterpillar with glasses. And then it just says various sources.
Sources. Yeah. So funny.
One of the first quotes that you see that is both in one of those little, what's it called, cutscenes, and is also on the board when we first see the English teacher is "Hell is other people."
Mm-hmm.
By Jean-Paul Sartre. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's a French playwright, I think. And that to me is just hilarious because as an
True.
introvert, hell is other people.
Even as an extrovert. Something I liked, we kind of brought it up with the Ghost Messenger app, is I like when you have to get creative when you're implying that they're using something that exists, but you can't use the brand name. So to me, Ghost Messenger is a take on Snapchat because the little ghost is the brand symbol for Snapchat. But another thing they do is Hushmo me instead of Venmo me.
I like it too because I've always said this. I feel weird about things that take place in our universe that aren't supposed to be. So I like that it's like signifying this is our time and place, but it is not exactly the same. It's similar to how all of the Nickelodeon shows had pair phones instead of iPhones.
Yes.
It's familiar but different.
Amanda mentioned this in the summary, but I really appreciate how you saw Paul and Ellie's relationship grow to the point that, like, I wouldn't say Paul was a popular kid, but he also doesn't give me unpopular vibes because he's on the football team and stuff like that. And I just appreciated that when people start shouting chugga chugga choo choo, Paul yells at them. Like he full on stands up for her, and I really loved that.
Yeah. I will say on that note about whether or not he's popular, I think one of the things that's a little lacking in this film or feels a little confusing is that none of these characters seem to have friends, even though they're all just meeting or talking for the first time really now.
Yeah.
Like,
That
you would
is
think Ellie
true.
would have at least one friend. She spent the majority of her life there. Paul's never like, no, I can't do this. I have to hang out with people.
Yeah, and they talk about like him being busy with training and stuff, but we don't really see it all that much.
No, there's that one girl at the party that's like, Ellie Chu, I've always wanted to tell you I love your nails. And she's like, yeah, I can never get the bite grease out of them. And she's like, they look badass. But like, you would think that she would have one friend and you would think Paul would have a handful.
Yeah, totally. It's not realistic that they wouldn't have any friends, and we don't see any friends.
But I do appreciate, I do think that adds to the story because you don't need to care about side characters. You
Yeah.
just care about these three and you get to know them really well.
A scene that really stands out that we didn't really include in the summary, but is part of the letters that Paul and Ellie, Paul
Ellie
and
and Aster.
Aster, but yes, Ellie writing as Paul, are exchanging, and they are talking about how one time they read that the difference between a good painting and a great painting is just 5 strokes, and it's normally the 5 boldest strokes.
Mhm.
And so Ellie sets up this just wall and basically challenges Aster to paint the 5 boldest strokes. And so they're doing street art on this like random wall, and it's just really sweet. It's very fun. I really liked that scene.
Yeah, it's a montage where all of the dialogue is just Ellie and Aster reading the letters back and forth. And it's this sort of banter where they're challenging each other. And that is sort of the point of the film, is about having the bravery to live your life boldly, whether it's admitting that you're gay in a small religious town, or going to the school that's out of state, or going to art school and trying to find yourself instead of just marrying the quarterback, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I do have to say respectfully to Aster, while I was watching that, this is the first time I think actually in the dozen times that I've seen this film. While I was watching it last night, I was like, who in their right mind thinks that Paul is doing this painting?
Also, that Paul came up with the idea. Like, for him to go and do the painting, I feel like is more realistic than to come up with the idea.
Well, that too, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, like there's a reason Aster said deep down she knew, because come on.
Yeah.
She wanted to believe that was within Paul, and I get that.
Yeah. It also, I'm like, this is how people get catfished. Because people are just gullible. There is this scene because a lot of the exchanges between Ellie and Paul happen in the confessional booth at church. And there's this one scene where they are talking about emojis and the use of emojis. And Ellie is like, I just don't get them. Like, what does that mean? I don't know what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, in the middle is the pastor sitting, and they don't realize he's in the confessional booth. So he's like hearing them talk about all of this and is like confused, and it is hilarious. Like,
They might realize he's there. He's not allowed to tell people secrets, so
that's true. I guess I
Yeah.
just assumed they didn't know because they constantly use that as a place to like, have their exchanges about Aster. But it was so funny. It is like the well-needed comedy breaks that this film kind of, because it's so beautifully shot and kind of slow, as I mentioned, when they have these like punchy, really funny bits, it really helps move the film along. And so I really enjoyed that one.
yeah. In that scene is when Paul says to send a pineapple, owl, and caterpillar with glasses. And Ellie goes, what does that mean? And he says, the glasses make the caterpillar look smart. And then later they show it on that cutscene. And then when she's leaving for Grinnell on the train, he's looking kind of sad. Paul looks like he might cry. And Ellie takes out her phone and says, here. And then he looks at his phone and he says, the glasses do make the caterpillar look smart.
Yeah. It's so cute.
I also really like how there's a lot of things. There's a lot of details in this film that are like that, where it comes back around.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like things are just included for like a ha-ha or even for a dramatic moment. Like, everything that is included in these characters or that these characters say to one another has a point. And so they do constantly come back around at multiple points throughout the film, which is nice.
Yeah, even one of the things Ellie's dad does, we didn't talk about him very much, but most of the time when we see him, he sat at home watching foreign films, supposedly to learn English, though he also really likes old French cinema. And whenever there's a climactic moment about to happen in the film, he says best part. And then when we have that beautiful scene at the hot springs where Ellie is with Aster and they're listening to the radio, a song comes on where Ellie says that her mom really loved that song, and that something about like you can always find like the 5 seconds that are the best part. And Aster's trying to identify the best part of that song, and then she does. So like everything, all these little bits of dialogue and details really come around. Like this film is really well thought out.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of well thought out, as more of these films, the 2020 and later films have come up, obviously texting is a huge part of life. And so characters text. And so filmmakers have had to find a way to like include that on screen. And I liked the way this happened. When Aster and Paul are on their date and Ellie is texting as Paul, you see the date happen and you see shots of Ellie in the car, and you also see the text popping up on the screen, and you see Paul texting Ellie, but Ellie also texting Aster, and it's all happening simultaneously, but you see it all on the screen at once. I just really liked that. I think that's one of my favorite ways that like showing texting has been done. Like I really enjoyed it.
What I love about that scene, first of all, I prefer it without the bubbles. Some people prefer to use the bubbles. I don't like the bubbles. So this is just white text over the brick wall of the restaurant, which is nice. And what I really love is the pacing and the sound effects, because they emphasize the text as part of the film. So every text that gets sent in this film gets a little like whoop, like iMessage sound. But when Paul is texting her, he's sending like with all caps and with periods, and because he wants to know and he's very stern. So he goes, "What are you doing?" And instead of hearing that, because you're not reading it out loud, they said do 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 do, like sound effects added to it.
Yes.
So you really feel the difference in tone between the messages as well. It's so fun and animated.
Yeah, it was really, when I was watching it, I actually rewinded it because I was like, dang, I don't know if I've seen texting done like this. And maybe I have, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. It's hard to pull it off like that.
Totally.
There's a cute scene before the talent show after the second date where Paul and Ellie go thrift shopping for outfits for the talent show, and they're talking about the date and various things, and then Paul just looks at Ellie and is like, they have dressing rooms, because she's been trying on a skirt over her jeans, and then he helps her pick out, he tells her to go in the dressing room and he'll pick out stuff for her because he has a sister and like this isn't a big deal. But it just like showed a softer, I mean, he is a soft boy, but it showed a more feminine side to him as well, and it was just really cute.
Yeah, because she very much was like, oh, I can't ask you to do that. And he's like, I have sisters, go in the fitting room. Like, I'll toss you stuff. Like, he wanted to do it.
Yeah, and I think that probably meant a lot since her mom passed when she was 13, not just 4 years ago. I thought her mom passed a lot longer ago, but I realized in this watch through it was when she was 13. So she really doesn't have like a feminine figure in her life to help her with things like clothing and her appearance. And I'm not saying Paul is that feminine figure, but just having someone to care enough about you to want to help dress you kind of means a lot.
Speaking of her not having a feminine figure, I get that this is her character and that her and her dad are not very well off and all of these things. However, they put her in the loosest, terrible fitting jeans multiple times in this film. And I'm like, we couldn't put her in better fitting pants? Like, just pants that are her size.
I never even noticed.
Oh my God, they're just so ill-fitting. And I'm like, can we just put her in pants that fit her? Like, I'm not asking for anything more than that. Just make them fit, please.
Yeah, I think it was really part of the character, obviously. They needed to dress Leah Lewis down. But I get it. You want better for her.
Yeah, I do.
When Aster finds Ellie in Paul's bed, Ellie moves way too fast.
Facts.
That girl is supposed to be hungover as hell. Like, she was drunk, and Paul left her Advil and water, and she's about to take it. Has not taken it. Has just woken up. And she hears Aster, and she, like, jumps out of bed and has her jacket halfway on by the time Aster shows up down those steps. And I'm like, girl, your head must be pounding. Like, I want to throw up.
Yeah, there's no way, even if you do realize that, like, you need to move your butt, the pace that you are able to do that at is a third of the speed she was moving at.
Yeah, I at least wanted something like a hand on the head or something, like some acknowledgement of her condition.
Yeah. We didn't really touch on this too much in the plot because it's just not important, but there is this thing where Trig's like, "Oh, I know, Ellie, you're into me," and how he's like, "Hey, did Ellie get a little hot?" And he kind of like comes on to Ellie, and one of these moments is outside Ellie's house, and we see Ellie's dad out the window spray him with the like sink
The sink extension.
yeah, and it
Mhm.
is hilarious.
Yeah, because her dad really, we only see him in the house. He's not involved in her life. He becomes friends with Paul because Paul comes to hang out. So to see him stick up for her and do that, even just that little bit of an interaction, is so good. And Trig deserved so much worse than that.
Oh yeah.
But speaking of Ellie's dad, I just have to highlight what has always been my favorite scene of this movie, even though it's fairly inconsequential to the plot. Not that this film has a lot of plot, is when Paul and Ellie haven't made up yet, but he knows that she's gay. He brings the sausage delivery over, and her dad asks if they've had a fight or broke up. And so he explains that they were never together and tries to explain that Ellie's different. He says that her dad doesn't see her and that she's capable of so much. Like, he's trying in simplified English to explain that she has so much potential in life. And in return, her dad speaks about the passing of his wife in Chinese to Paul. And Paul doesn't like try to tell him he doesn't understand. He doesn't look around awkwardly. He stands and gives an expression as if he is genuinely trying to listen.
Mhm.
And I just think it's so beautiful.
Mhm.
I think it's so touching and respectful. And then her dad
Mhm.
does speak a bit more in English about how he loves her so much he never wants her to change.
Mhm.
And while he's speaking Chinese, we learn more about her and him because he says that when her mom passed when she was 13, he was devastated. And a few days later, she was in the booth doing the lights for him. And he was so proud. And like, you know, she's been taking on that role literally ever since, like hasn't even really properly grieved her mom. But I love that scene of the two of them who don't really understand each other, but love the same person
Mhm.
coming together and finding a way to love and respect each other.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah, I also really appreciated that, like, it's not even that Paul just like stood there. Paul was actively listening. Even though he could not comprehend, he was actively listening, and it was really sweet.
And I think people really knock on nonverbal communication. I can say, as someone who has lived in countries, but especially one country where English is not the native tongue, and there's been a lot of communication barriers, even when you don't understand what someone's saying, tone means a lot.
Mhm.
And you can listen and you can comprehend some of the sentiment just by paying attention to tone and delivery.
Totally.
So, just a beautiful example of that. And my last thing that I really need to shout out is like boys and girls can just be friends.
Yeah.
And that's like something I really loved about this movie. Like, it's not really a romance, it is a coming of age, even though romance is part of it. I will say, one of the people that I made watch this at the end was like, did they kind of ruin it? Did she and Paul kind of like, does she love Paul? Is that why she's crying? And I'm like, no, she's crying because they're friends.
Yeah.
I just love movies about boys and girls being friends.
I get why it happened, but I think I could have done without the Paul kissing her scene. Again, it
Mm.
was there for like drama and to like lead into other things that happen in the film. Like, I get it, but I think that without that scene, it could have solidified their friendship a little bit more. Like, I just don't know that I needed that scene.
I think that I hear what you're saying and I agree with it, that it could have done without. I do think it's very natural at any age, and especially at their age, to confuse those feelings.
Sure.
And Paul has started appreciating who she is as a human, but until he knows that she's gay, he doesn't fully know her.
Yeah.
So I don't mind it. I don't, but I get what you're saying, that like it could have been even purer if he never had that confusion.
Yeah.
Getting into things we don't love as much, I'm the only one that added to this.
Yeah.
Would yours just be the pacing?
Yeah, mine would be the pacing. But here's the thing. I think I'm torn because I understand why the pacing is what it is. And I do agree that it makes it a beautiful film. And without that pacing, I don't think the story would have been told as like beautifully, because it does give them opportunity to have these like gorgeous shots of just like Ellie and Aster floating for a minute and a half, you know? So the pacing allows for things that makes this film what it is. But like, as I've said in other things, like I like things quick, snappy, active. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's more of a me problem and a less of this film problem. But
Yeah.
the pacing does make me sleepy, so I guess I could say that's something I don't love as much, but it's not that I would want it to change.
Yeah. And I do think that one of the reasons I love this film so much, and like you said, that slow pacing can allow for those beautiful shots. And there's so many beautiful shots. There's so much beautiful music. The score lends itself to those moments of suspense where Ellie's gonna kiss Aster before she does, because the music is building up to it. Which, by the way, guys, she like throws her bike on the ground and runs after her. Like, it's great cinema. But I think it's really rare to find queer stories that are such low stakes and are so beautiful. I think so often it's about getting thrown out of your home or getting bullied or really struggling to understand who you are and what your identity is. And that's never that. Like, Ellie likes Aster from the beginning. She's not conflicted about it. That's not the point of the story. No one's disowning her. Paul comes around. And that's not something that we've mentioned yet, actually, is I really love the sympathy towards the small town people and the religion of it. And that Paul says, it's a sin, you're going to hell. And then he comes around to it because it's just something he knows.
Yeah, and it's not even that he inherently knows or believes that. It's just that is what he was told. And so when he says it to her, it's just like, oh, you're going to hell. But again, it's not accusatory. It's not mad. It's just very matter of fact, because that is what he's been told.
He's sad when he says it. Because this person he cares for is going to hell. So I think that, yeah, this is not something we dislike. We haven't gotten into that section yet. That was more of me rambling about how much I love this movie. Okay, but things that we don't love as much, since I added to this, I could have used a hug before Ellie and Paul got on, or between Ellie and Paul before she got on the train.
Agreed.
When I was watching it this time, I was like, what is this lacking? A hug. It's really cute. She calls him a wussy for almost crying. And like that's cute, but I could have used a hug before the wussy stuff.
I second that.
Also because he's so big and she's so small.
Yeah, so cute.
Okay, the only like smallest gripe I have is because the first time I watched this film, I was a little confused by this. And I know when I've watched this with other people, they've been a little confused by this. There is a scene earlier in the film where Ellie asks Paul what he loves about Aster. And he's like, well, she's pretty and she's nice. And what else? Why else would you love someone? Yep. And then she goes on, clearly losing track of herself, saying, the way that her eyes see through you and how she has at least 5 different voices and her laugh busts out of her like she can't control it. And he says, I'm so stupid. That's what you say when you love someone. And that scene feels like an aha, he's figured it out moment. But then he backtracks because he says, like, that's what you say when you love someone and you don't even care. And she's like, okay, cool, relieved. And they keep talking about Paul and Aster. But the first like couple times that I saw it, that felt like an aha moment. So then later when he's like, oh, you like Aster, and has that whole moment, I felt like, wait a second, didn't he already figure that out? Like, I was confused.
I guess because when that moment happens, Ellie does backtrack out of it and goes, no, I didn't mean that. Like, love is how much effort you put in, and you've been putting in all this effort, and turns it back on him. So I felt like
it didn't confuse you.
Yeah, it didn't confuse me as much. Also, like, Paul is dumb. Like, he
is dumb.
He doesn't read into things until they happen multiple times. Because there's even, like, which we also didn't touch on, but there are things where, like, he's starting to get calls and stuff from food critics in Seattle, and he is like, oh, I'm getting more attention, and then later he finds letters that Ellie has written to send out.
On his behalf, yeah.
On his behalf. And so I think it takes him a few times to connect the dots. Like, that's just one example, but there are other things where it's like, it just takes him a little extra time. So I think this is setting it up in his brain. And then later on, when he realizes, it's like everything connects, and he's like, oh, you like her.
That's fair. That's fair. I think there was just something about that initial scene that could have been a little clearer in the dialogue or direction for me personally.
Yeah.
But you're right. It is in Paul's character to be extra oblivious. The detail we forgot to mention that I also find is hilarious, because again, Alice, we just thought of everything, is that Aster is going to art school to figure things out. And I cannot believe that there was not a joke on Ellie's behalf about how, oh, if you're not gay now, you will be after art school.
Yeah.
Like, it was right there.
Yeah.
But I get it. Ellie wouldn't have made that joke, but I want to make that joke every time I watch that scene.
Yeah. Some awards that the half of it has won. So they won the Founders Award for Best U.S. Narrative Feature at Tribeca Film Festival, and then they were nominated for Best Screenplay at the Independent Spirit Awards and Outstanding Film at the GLAAD Media Awards. So not only was this, like, well received on Netflix and watched a bunch of times, it also was, like,
well received,
nominated and won. Yeah,
I will say it has a 6.9 out of 10 on IMDb, and I don't like that.
Yeah, that feels a little low.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of cinema, guys.
I agree.
This is the awards go in our fun fact section, and my only other fun fact is that Leah Lewis is buff as fuck.
Yeah, Amanda sent me Instagrams of her, like, doing pull-ups, and yeah, I didn't realize that she didn't look anything like Ellie Chu, but yeah, she's very buff and, like, kind of, like, hot and sensual, and I was like, this is not Ellie, like, at all.
There was a time during the pandemic where she was just posting a lot of yoga videos, and she's one of those people that can do, like, every single muscle of isolation. Like, she has abs and has had abs for years.
Yeah, crazy. Getting into quotes.
We have a lot, guys, because it's so well written. So just, like, bear with us.
Yeah. Also, like, credit to Alice, because, like, that's why we have so many quotes. The first one I wrote is an exchange between Paul and Ellie towards the beginning of the film, where Paul goes, "Love makes you screwy. Don't you get screwy?" She's like, "No."
When they are discussing Aster and love and stuff, Paul says something about effort, and Ellie says there's no points for effort. And he says, isn't that what love is? How much effort you put into loving someone? Which is a common theme in the film, is what is love? Another fun one is, if I knew what love was, I would quote myself.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That was Ellie in one of her letters to Aster.
Less meaningful of a quote. Got a good Paul quote here. Speaking about his taco sausage, when he's first introducing the concept to Ellie of the taco sausage, he goes, 2 hand foods, 1 great taste.
And he says it almost like to himself. He's like looking at his hands, and he's like, 2 hand foods, 1 great taste.
Yeah, it's so cute.
When talking about her dad, Ellie is explaining how he ended up being stuck at the station manager in Squamish, and Paul interjects, he doesn't speak very good. She says, he's not bad. And he says, I don't speak very good either. Which I really liked, because a lot of native English speakers don't have that kind of humility.
Yeah.
When Ellie is talking to the teacher says, everyone in this town fears God, but you know who God fears? The teachers union.
Yes. Yeah. And I also think this is either the same it might be the same conversation or another conversation with the teacher, but I think it's around the same time, where the teacher says to Ellie, You know where else you can meet people your age who get you? College.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm like, truth.
At the party, Ellie she goes from being looking kind of sober to suddenly being very drunk. Paul goes up to her and asks how many drinks she's had, and she's hilariously goes, "I want you to know that I can tell I have been drinking spirits because I have to pee far more often than would be indicated by plain punch. So don't think I haven't been monitoring the situation." Then he just goes, "Cool, cool." And
Yeah.
takes her home.
Yeah, he's like, let's get you out of here.
It's such a nerdy way to describe being drunk, and it makes me giggle every time.
Yeah. It was very in character, but also you could tell she was intoxicated. It was just really, it was well acted, well written. It's a great scene.
It's when you're a nerd and you're fighting being drunk.
Yeah. When she's with Aster and they're at the little lake, pond, hot spring, whatever it is, Aster like keeps looking at her because she's so much clothing on, even though they're in the water. And Aster's like, "Are you wearing long underwear?" And she's like, "I'm a Russian doll of clothing."
Yeah. In that same scene, at one point, Ellie says gravity is matter's response to loneliness, which is like, is it profound or is it weird? Yes. I like
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
It sounds nice. And then in the church scene, after Aster slaps Paul on the face and walks off, Paul's mom stands up and says, "Mommy wants you to know in case you are gay. Mommy loves you anyway." And he says, "I'm not gay." "Oh, thank God. I might want to change up the sausage recipe, though." Are you insane? I love that recipe.
Yes. Which is the exact response he knew he was going to get, which is why he had not been wanting to say it.
Yeah. But it's so funny
too
that
good.
this small religious town and his mom is more accepting of him being gay than changing this family sausage recipe.
Yes.
Okay, final thoughts. I love coming of age stories. I would like more coming of age stories. I just really love them. I think they're often very beautiful.
Me too. And this is a really, really, really well told one.
My other final thought is really more of a question. Do you at all find it confusing that it's like kind of set up about finding your other half at the very beginning, but then she says it's not a romance? And then it's called the half of it, and no one really falls in love. And is Paul supposed to be like the other half and like your soulmate, or is it about completing yourself? Like, was any of that confusing, or was it just like, yeah?
I think it's kind of about all of it.
Yeah. I mean, that is the coming of age story, right?
Because I think like it is about love, but it's not a love story.
And it's not about romantic love. It's about all kinds of love. Anyway, that's the half of it.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched this movie, like, I cannot emphasize enough, go watch it, especially if you have like queer trauma and insecurities and you just want to watch something wholesome.
And it's just beautiful. If you like beautifully shot cinema, like watch it. So good. Up next in our Pride Month series, we are doing like a fun music episode where we're going to talk about all things Demi Lovato. Which we are both huge Demi fans, so I am excited for this one. Please go give us a like and follow on all our social media, 90s Babies Nostalgia on Instagram and YouTube. Spell out the word 90s, but on TikTok, use the numericals there. Also, if you have a moment, give us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify because it really helps us out. And with that one, we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.